everyone rejected the Omega Girl at auction until the Alpha King claimed her. She stood on that platform with strange silver scars covering her skin, while every alpha in the kingdom passed on bidding, worthless, damaged, about to be exiled forever. Then the most powerful wolf alive spoke from the shadows. The Alpha King who hadn't taken a mate in 2 centuries. 1,000,000 gold coins. For her. But why would a king who could have anyone want the Omega everyone else rejected? Those scars hide a secret that could change everything. Now she's trapped in his palace where nothing is what it seems. A dead mate has returned. Dark forces are closing in, and the Omega everyone laughed at might hold a power that terrifies even the strongest alphas. Will the king's claim save her from a fate worse than rejection? Or has she just become a pawn in a game that could destroy them all? This channel isn't just about stories. It's about holding on to what still matters: empathy, truth, love, and the courage to care. The preparation cells beneath the grand auction house reeked of fear and cheap perfume. Sarah Winters stood against the cold stone wall, trying to ignore the burning sensation of her silver scars as they caught the flickering torchlight. Around her, other Omega girls preened and chatted nervously, shooting occasional sneers in her direction. "Look at those hideous marks!" a blonde Omega whispered loudly enough for Sarah to hear. "She's wasting everyone's time being here." "I heard no alpha has ever chosen a scarred Omega," another added with a cruel laugh. "She'll be packless by midnight." Sarah pressed her hands against her arms, feeling the raised lines of her scars through the thin fabric of her white auction dress. She tried to cover them with makeup, but the silvery marks seemed to shine through everything, like moonlight through gossamer. Heavy boots echoed down the stone corridor as the guards approached. "Line up!" the head guard barked. "Auction's starting!" The Omegas quickly formed a line, shoving Sarah to the back. One by one, they were led up the narrow stairs to the platform above. Through the ceiling, Sarah could hear the auctioneer's booming voice and the excited murmurs of the crowd as each Omega was presented. "Sold to Alpha Richardson of the Mountain Pack! Sold to Alpha Bennett of the River Valley!" The announcements of successful matches filtered down, along with enthusiastic applause. The line grew shorter, and Sarah's heart beat faster. When only she remained, a guard grabbed her arm roughly. "Let's get this over with," he muttered, pushing her toward the stairs. The full moon's light hit Sarah like a physical force as she emerged onto the stage. Hundreds of wolves filled the amphitheater, their faces shadowed but their eyes gleaming in the darkness. The auction platform felt exposed, vulnerable, a sacrificial altar where her last chance at belonging would likely die. Marcus Cray, the auctioneer, made a show of consulting his papers, his lip curling slightly. "Next up, Sarah Winters," he announced, his voice notably less enthusiastic than it had been for previous candidates. "Age, 22 years. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She was dangerously close to the age when unmated wolves were declared packless. Bloodline, unknown. Current pack status, ward of Riverside Pack Orphanage. Sarah forced herself to stand straight, despite the wave of whispers and snickers that swept through the audience. Her scars felt like they were on fire now, and she knew they must be clearly visible to everyone. "Starting bid at 100 gold pieces," Marcus called out, though his tone suggested he expected no takers. Silence fell over the amphitheater. In the front rows, several alphas who had bid enthusiastically on previous Omegas now studied their boots or looked away. Others openly laughed, nudging their companions and pointing at her scars. 75 gold pieces! Marcus tried again, dropping the price. Still no response. 50 gold pieces. His voice held a note of desperation now. The crowd was growing restless, and several wolves were already standing to leave. "Why waste our time with damaged goods?" someone called out from the audience, triggering more cruel laughter. Sarah's vision blurred with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. She'd known this would happen, had prepared herself for it, but the reality was far more painful than she'd imagined. Marcus Cray sighed heavily and lifted his gavel. "If there are no bids..." He paused for dramatic effect, though everyone knew what was coming. Once he declared no sale, Sarah would officially be packless, exiled from werewolf society forever. The gavel began its descent, and Sarah closed her eyes, unable to watch the final nail being driven into the coffin of her hopes. 10,000 gold pieces! The deep, commanding voice cut through the night air like a blade. Sarah's eyes flew open as gasps and startled exclamations erupted throughout the amphitheater. The voice had come from the shadows at the very back of the audience, where a tall figure stood partially concealed by darkness. Marcus Cray's gavel hung frozen in midair, his mouth agape. I'm sorry, did you say 10,000 gold pieces? 1,000,000 gold crescents. The commanding voice rang out again, louder and clearer this time. The amphitheater fell into absolute silence. Even the night creatures seemed to pause their songs as Alpha King Theron Blackmore stepped from the shadows of the royal platform into the moonlight. His powerful presence sent a ripple of tension through the crowd. He stood tall and regal, his broad shoulders draped in a midnight blue cloak fastened with the royal crest. His dark hair held traces of silver at the temples, and his golden eyes blazed with intensity as they fixed on Sarah. Those eyes held centuries of power and knowledge. The Alpha King was said to be over 200 years old, and he hadn't taken a mate since losing his first during the Great Pack War. Marcus Cray's face had gone pale. Your Majesty, he stammered, bowing so low he nearly fell over. We are honored by your presence, but surely, such a sum. Did I stutter? Theron's voice carried effortlessly across the space, though he barely raised it. The amount he'd offered could purchase an entire territory, enough land and resources to support hundreds of wolves. Pack leaders who had been lounging carelessly in their seats moments before now scrambled to stand and bow. Some nearly tripped over each other in their haste to show proper respect. The same alphas who had laughed at Sarah's scars now looked anywhere but at her, their faces burning with shame. Theron descended the steps from the royal platform with measured grace. His movement was that of an apex predator, fluid and controlled, yet promising lethal speed if needed. He never took his eyes off Sarah as he approached the auction stage. The crowd parted before him like water around a stone. Sarah couldn't move. Her heart thundered in her chest as the most powerful wolf in the kingdom circled her once, his presence making her scars tingle and burn in a way she'd never experienced before. His scent wrapped around her, pine needles, winter wind, and something ancient and wild that made her wolf stir restlessly beneath her skin. When he completed his circle, Theron extended his hand to her. His fingers were long and elegant, yet marked with the calluses of a warrior. "You're coming with me, little moon," he said, his deep voice softening on the ancient endearment. Several elder wolves in attendance exchanged shocked glances at the term. Little moon was a sacred phrase from the old texts, used in prophecies about legendary moon-blessed wolves. It hadn't been spoken aloud in centuries. Sarah stared at his offered hand, her mind spinning with confusion. This morning she had been worthless, a scarred Omega destined for exile. Now the Alpha King himself was offering a fortune for her claim. It made no sense, and yet, when she placed her trembling hand in his, an electric shock jolted through her entire body. Her scars flared with brilliant silver light, illuminating the stage like captured moonbeams. Theron's eyes widened slightly, the only crack in his composed expression. The crowd erupted into chaos. Wolves began shouting and pointing, some pushing forward to get a better look, while others drew back in fear. Questions flew through the air like arrows. Did you see that light? What's happening to her scars? Why would the Alpha King want her? Theron ignored them all. He wrapped Sarah's smaller hand in his warm grip and drew her closer, shielding her from the frenzied crowd with his broad shoulders. Come, he said quietly, for her ears alone. This is no place for what you are. From the shadows near the royal platform, a lean figure watched their departure with unnaturally sharp focus. Lysander Cross, the Alpha King's beta, tracked their movement with calculating eyes. His handsome face remained carefully neutral, but his fingers twitched at his sides as if itching to grasp something just out of reach. Theron led Sarah from the auction stage, his stride purposeful and unhurried despite the growing commotion behind them. His hand remained firmly clasped around hers, and each step made her scars pulse with that strange new energy. She felt simultaneously more afraid and more safe than she had ever been in her life. The last thing Sarah heard before they exited the amphitheater was Marcus Cray's shaking voice. "Sold! To His Majesty, Alpha King Theron Blackmore, for 1,000,000 gold crescents." The black carriage rolled silently through the ancient forest, its enchanted wheels barely disturbing the carpet of fallen leaves. Sarah sat across from Alpha King Theron, watching moonlight filter through the dense canopy overhead. Every attempt she made at conversation died beneath his stoic silence. His golden eyes remained fixed on the passing shadows, deep in thought. After 3 hours of tense quiet, the trees parted to reveal Blackmore Palace, a sprawling fortress of obsidian stone that seemed to absorb the moonlight rather than reflect it. Towering spires pierced the night sky like black thorns, and massive walls bore intricate carvings of wolves in battle. Before Sarah could gather her courage to speak again, the carriage door flew open. A plump, silver-haired woman with kind eyes and an air of absolute authority stood waiting. "Welcome home, Your Majesty," she said, bowing to Theron before turning warm eyes on Sarah. "And you must be our new guest. I'm Maeve, head housekeeper of Blackmore Palace." Theron nodded once. "See that she's properly settled, Maeve. I'll speak with her at dinner." Without another word, he strode away, his cloak billowing behind him. Sarah felt oddly bereft watching him disappear into the shadows of his fortress. "Don't mind him, dear," Maeve said, taking Sarah's arm with surprising gentleness. "The Alpha King carries many burdens. Come now, let's get you cleaned up and comfortable." Maeve's motherly demeanor seemed at odds with the cold grandeur of the palace, but Sarah found herself instinctively trusting the older woman. She led Sarah through maze-like corridors of polished stone to a set of double doors carved with moon phases. "These will be your chambers," Maeve announced, ushering her inside. Sarah's breath caught. The suite was larger than the entire orphanage where she'd grown up. Plush rugs covered dark wood floors, and a massive four-poster bed draped in midnight blue silk dominated the sleeping chamber. A sitting room held overstuffed chairs and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, while the bathing chamber featured a sunken marble tub big enough for 3 wolves. Yet Sarah couldn't miss the 2 guards positioned outside her doors, their expressions carefully blank. This might be a gilded cage, but it was still a cage. "Try to rest before dinner, dear," Maeve said, squeezing her hand. "I'll send someone to help you dress later." Left alone, Sarah explored her new prison. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a clear view of the palace grounds below. Her gaze was drawn to a sprawling garden filled with stone monuments, a memorial to fallen wolves. Moonlight gleamed off the polished markers, each bearing names and dates of those lost in various battles and wars. One monument stood apart from the others, larger and more elaborate. Even from this height, Sarah could read the inscription, "Morgana Blackmore, beloved mate. Lost but never forgotten." Fresh flowers lay at its base, their petals silver in the moonlight. Hours later, dressed in a flowing gown of deep purple, Sarah sat across from Theron in a private dining room. Candlelight caught the silver at his temples, and the ancient sadness in his eyes as he studied her. "Your scars," he said finally, breaking the heavy silence. "When did they first appear?" Sarah's hand instinctively rose to touch the silver marks that curved along her neck. I don't know exactly. I've had them as long as I can remember." "And how far back do your memories go?" "Only to age 7, she admitted. "Everything before that is blank." Theron leaned forward, his intensity making her scars tingle. "Do they hurt during certain moon phases? The full moon, perhaps? Or the dark moon?" "Yes," Sarah whispered, surprised by his knowledge. "They burn strongest during the full moon, like tonight. And sometimes I dream of silver forests." The Alpha King's sharp intake of breath made her jump. Recognition and something like triumph flashed across his face before his expression darkened into grim certainty. As I suspected, he murmured, more to himself than to her. All this time, hiding in plain sight. What do you mean? Sarah asked. Why did you buy my claim? Why am I here? But Theron had retreated behind his mask of silence again, leaving Sarah's questions hanging in the candlelit air between them. The morning sun cast long shadows through the palace corridors as Theron led Sarah deep beneath the fortress. They descended a winding stone staircase that seemed to spiral endlessly into darkness, lit only by enchanted orbs that flickered to life as they passed. The ancient library has existed longer than our pack system, Theron explained, his voice echoing off the stone walls. Few are permitted to enter these chambers. At the bottom of the stairs, massive iron doors carved with celestial symbols blocked their path. Theron pressed his palm against them, and they swung open with a deep groan. The scent of old parchment and leather filled Sarah's nose as they entered a vast circular chamber. Thousands of scrolls and leather-bound texts filled shelves that stretched from floor to ceiling. At the chamber's center stood a pedestal holding a single scroll, its edges worn with age. Beside it rested a smooth black stone the size of Sarah's palm. For 2 centuries, I've guarded these prophecies, Theron said, carefully unrolling the ancient parchment. This one speaks of the moon-blessed, wolves touched by lunar magic who haven't walked among us for 500 years. Sarah leaned closer, gasping as she saw the illustrations. Intricate patterns of silver lines decorated the figures in the drawings, patterns that exactly matched the scars she'd carried since childhood. These markings, she whispered, tracing the images with trembling fingers. They're identical to mine. Theron nodded. The Moon-Blessed were said to possess extraordinary powers. They could see, manipulate, and even transform mate bonds, the very essence of what binds our kind together. He traced the ancient text with practiced ease. The prophecy speaks of a final moon-blessed wolf who would appear in our darkest hour, marked by silver scars that shine beneath the full moon. Sarah's heart pounded as the pieces fell into place. That's why you claimed me at the auction. You think I'm this moon-blessed wolf? I've spent decades searching for signs, Theron said, his golden eyes intense. A catastrophe is coming, one that threatens to destroy all werewolves. The Moon-Blessed are key to preventing it. He lifted the black stone from its pedestal. This moonstone has been dormant for centuries. Only true lunar magic can awaken it. With gentle hands, he placed the stone in Sarah's palm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then silver light began to pulse from within the stone's depths, matching the rhythm of Sarah's heartbeat. Her scars tingled and began to glow with the same ethereal radiance. Goddess above, Sarah breathed, watching the light dance between her scars and the stone. All her life, she'd believed her marks were a curse, proof that she was damaged and unwanted. But now... You're not cursed, little moon, Theron said softly, as if reading her thoughts. You're chosen. Hope bloomed in Sarah's chest, warm and bright as the moonstone's light. For the first time, her scars felt like a blessing rather than a burden. She wasn't a mistake to be hidden away. She had a purpose, a destiny. What happens now? She asked, still cradling the glowing stone. Before Theron could answer, hurried footsteps echoed down the staircase. Lysander Cross appeared in the doorway, his usually composed features tight with urgency. My king, he said, bowing quickly. I apologize for the interruption, but there's a situation that requires your immediate attention. Theron's expression darkened. What situation? Lysander's eyes darted briefly to Sarah before returning to his alpha. A woman has arrived at the palace gates. She ... He hesitated. She claims to be Morgana Blackmore. The moonstone slipped from Sarah's fingers, its light fading as it clattered against the stone floor. Theron had gone completely still, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. Impossible, he whispered. Morgana died 200 years ago in the Great Pack War. The woman bears Morgana's scent and carries her royal seal, Lysander reported grimly. She demands an audience with you. Sarah watched the Alpha King's shoulders tense, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. The revelation of her true nature, this moment of discovery and hope, had been shattered by 4 impossible words. Morgana Blackmore was alive. The throne room's massive doors groaned open, and time itself seemed to freeze. Morgana Blackmore glided into the chamber as if she'd stepped straight from the past, her beauty untouched by the 50 years since her supposed death. Her raven hair cascaded down her back, and her emerald eyes shimmered with unshed tears. The assembled pack members burst into frightened whispers. Some dropped to their knees, while others backed away as if seeing a ghost. Guards reached for weapons, then hesitated, unsure how to react to the return of their king's presumed dead mate. Theron stood before his obsidian throne, his usually impassive face cracking with naked shock. His golden eyes widened, and for the first time since Sarah had met him, the Alpha King looked truly shaken. "Morgana," he whispered, the name carrying centuries of pain. She approached slowly, tears now streaming freely down her porcelain cheeks. "My love," she said, her voice exactly as the elders had described in their stories, musical and haunting. "I've finally found my way back to you." Sarah felt it then. They all did. The old mate bond between Theron and Morgana pulsed through the room like a faint heartbeat. Though weakened by time and distance, it was unmistakably real. Sarah's own developing connection to Theron seemed to flutter uncertainly in response. "How?" Theron's voice was hoarse. "We searched for years. We found your blood, your torn clothes." Morgana stopped at the foot of the dais, close enough to touch him but maintaining a respectful distance. "The Northern Witch Coven," she explained, her words heavy with remembered horror. "They captured me during the chaos of the final battle. They needed a royal wolf's blood for their dark rituals, but they wanted me alive. They kept me suspended in magical stasis, feeding off my essence for decades." She shuddered. 2 months ago, a rival coven finally destroyed them. In the aftermath, their spells broke, and I escaped. The throne room had grown deathly quiet as she spoke. Even the guards stood transfixed by her tale. Sarah could see the truth of it written in the shadows behind Morgana's eyes, the kind of darkness that only comes from endless captivity. Then Morgana's gaze found Sarah, and the temperature in the room seemed to plummet. The returned mate's expression hardened as she sensed the nascent bond forming between Sarah and Theron. Something cold and calculating flickered across her features. Gone so quickly, Sarah wondered if she'd imagined it. "I see you've been busy in my absence, my king," Morgana said softly, though her words carried to every corner of the chamber. She drew herself up regally. "As is my right under pack law, I hereby invoke the right of first claim." Gasps echoed through the throne room. Elder Cornelius, who had been watching silently from the shadows, stepped forward with a grave expression. "You know what you're asking?" the elder questioned. "The right of first claim hasn't been invoked in over 3 centuries. "I know exactly what I'm asking," Morgana replied firmly. "The law states that if a presumed dead mate returns, they have the right to reclaim their position, regardless of any new bonds that may have formed in their absence." Sarah's heart thundered in her chest as the implications became clear. If Morgana's claim was honored, Sarah would be cast out, her newfound destiny as a moon-blessed wolf meaningless in the face of ancient pack law. Theron had gone rigid on his throne, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. The weak pulse of his old bond with Morgana warred against the fresh potential of his connection to Sarah. "Summon the full council of elders," Elder Cornelius commanded, his voice heavy with authority. "This matter must be decided in accordance with all our laws and traditions." As palace messengers scrambled to obey, Sarah watched Morgana and Theron stare at each other across the space between them. 50 years of separation, grief, and change hung in that distance. The mate bond between them might be weakened, but it was still there. a testament to what they had once meant to each other. Sarah touched her silver scars, which had stopped glowing the moment Morgana entered the room. Everything she'd just learned about her true nature, all the hope she'd finally allowed herself to feel, now balanced on the edge of a knife. The elders would decide her fate, weighing an ancient mate bond against the prophecy of the Moon Blessed. As palace servants rushed to prepare for the emergency council session, Sarah caught Morgana watching her with an unreadable expression. For just a moment, something like recognition flickered in the older woman's eyes, as if she knew exactly what Sarah was. Then her face smoothed back into perfect aristocratic composure, revealing nothing of her true thoughts. 3 days after Morgana's shocking return, the ancient court chamber within Blackmore Palace filled with the most powerful wolves in the kingdom. Ornate wooden benches creaked under the weight of pack representatives who had traveled hundreds of miles to witness this unprecedented case. Towering stained glass windows cast pools of colored light across the stone floor, while torches flickered in iron brackets along the walls. Sarah stood before the curved table where 7 palace elders sat in judgment, their aged faces stern beneath their ceremonial silver circlets. Her hands trembled as she endured yet another round of degrading questions. "How can a wolf of unknown parentage presume to stand as equal to a royal mate?" demanded Elder Victoria, her lip curling in disgust. "No documentation of your bloodline, no pack history. For all we know, you could be the offspring of rogues." Sarah fought to keep her voice steady. "My worth isn't determined by my bloodline, but by who I choose to be." Whispers rippled through the gathered audience. Such defiance before the elders was practically unheard of. At the far end of the chamber, Morgana sat with perfect poise, a small smile playing at her lips. When her turn came to present evidence, she approached the elders' table with fluid grace. "I present the original scroll of my mating ceremony with Theron," Morgana announced, unrolling an ancient parchment. "Performed under the full moon, witnessed by 300 pack members, and sealed with both blood and magic." Her eyes found Sarah's. A true mate bond, formed through proper channels, not some accident of fate. Theron watched from his throne above the proceedings, his expression carved from stone. The law required him to remain neutral until the elders reached their decision. Elder Cornelius, the oldest and most respected of the council, leaned forward to examine the scroll. His ancient eyes narrowed as he studied the faded text. That's when Lysander Cross stepped from the shadows, his voice cutting through the murmured discussions. "Honorable elders, has anyone considered a more sinister explanation for our king's sudden interest in this?" He paused, eyes raking over Sarah dismissively. "Unusual Omega?" The room fell silent. "What are you suggesting, Beta Cross?" Elder Cornelius asked. Lysander's smile was razor-sharp. "Those mysterious scars, the king's uncharacteristic behavior. Perhaps we're dealing with witchcraft. After all, what better way for an Omega to rise above her station than to enchant the most powerful Alpha in the kingdom?" Sarah's chest tightened as panic and rage coursed through her. "How dare you!" But Lysander continued, his voice dripping with false concern. "We've all seen how witches can corrupt mate bonds, given what happened to Lady Morgana." The accusation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her scars suddenly burned white-hot, and silver light erupted from the markings across her skin. The power surged outward in a wave she couldn't control. Gasps of shock turned to cries of pleasure as the burst of energy washed over the mated pairs in the room. Wolves clutched their chests, their eyes wide as their mate bonds suddenly intensified. Couples reached for each other, overwhelmed by the strengthened connection. "My mate?" one alpha whispered, staring at his partner in wonder. "I can feel you so clearly." Even Theron's careful mask slipped as the wave of power reached him. His gaze locked with Sarah's, the potential bond between them humming with newfound strength. Terror spread through the chamber as wolves realized what had happened. Some backed away from Sarah, while others looked at her with newfound awe. "Enough!" Elder Cornelius's voice boomed through the chaos. He stood slowly, his ancient eyes fixed on Sarah's glowing scars. I have seen this power before in the histories of our people. This is the mark of the moon blessed. Silence fell once more. This matter requires proper investigation, Elder Cornelius continued. The trial will be postponed for 1 month. During this time, both women will remain in the palace under observation. And he turned to Theron. Our king must maintain absolute neutrality. No private meetings, no special favors to either party. Sarah's heart sank as Theron nodded grimly, bound by pack law to obey the elder's decree. This session is adjourned, Elder Cornelius announced. We will reconvene in 30 days' time. As the chamber slowly emptied, Sarah stood rooted to the spot, her scars still shimming faintly. She was more powerful than anyone had imagined, but that power had just marked her as either a savior or a threat. Now she would spend the next month trapped in the palace, surrounded by wolves who either feared her or wanted to use her, while the one person she was growing to trust was forbidden from offering comfort. She had never felt more alone. Despite the elder's strict decree of separation, a hooded figure slipped through the shadowy corridors of Blackmore Palace well past midnight, leading Sarah to a secluded wing she'd never noticed before. When the figure pulled back their hood, Sarah recognized Theron's familiar golden eyes. "My grandmother wishes to meet you," he whispered, his hand hovering near her arm without touching. "She may be our only hope of understanding your powers before the trial." The hidden wing opened into a circular chamber filled with hanging crystals that caught moonlight streaming through a domed glass ceiling. In the center sat an elderly woman with silver hair and milky white eyes, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "Welcome, Moon's avatar," Oracle Celine said, turning her blind gaze directly to Sarah. "I've been waiting 5 centuries for you." Sarah's scars tingled. "How did you know you were coming?" Celine's laugh was surprisingly youthful. "The same way I know you're the one prophesied to either unite all wolves under a new order or destroy us completely. The moon shows me what she wishes." And so began Sarah's secret training. Every morning before dawn, she would slip away to Selene's chambers, learning to harness the power that coursed through her scarred skin. The ancient oracle was a demanding teacher. "Still your mind," Selene instructed, as Sarah sat cross-legged on a meditation cushion. "Your power flows from emotion, but must be controlled by will. Feel the moonlight in your blood." Hours of frustrating attempts gradually gave way to breakthrough moments. One morning, Sarah opened her eyes to find the world transformed. Glowing threads of light connected mated pairs throughout the palace, visible through walls and floors like a magical tapestry. "The mate bonds," Selene confirmed, nodding, "each one unique, yet all connected to the moon's blessing. Now you must learn to strengthen them." Palace servants who knew of Sarah's training volunteered to help, allowing her to practice manipulating their bonds. She started small, amplifying the emotional connection between a mated pair of kitchen workers, bringing tears to their eyes as their love flowed stronger. Her greatest success came with Helena and Marcus, groundskeepers who had tried for 7 years to conceive a child. After Sarah carefully wove strands of moonlight into their weakened bond, Helena felt the first stirrings of new life within her womb. But while Sarah grew stronger in secret, Morgana's influence spread through the court like poison honey. The returned mate held court in the palace gardens, sharing carefully chosen tales of her past with Theron. "Remember the summer festival when you shifted just to howl at the moon with me?" Morgana's musical laugh drew appreciative smiles from the nobles gathered around her. "You were so carefree then, my love." Sarah tried to ignore the whispers that followed these sessions. How clearly meant for each other the original mates had been, how presumptuous it was for a scarred Omega to think she could replace such a bond. One moonlit night, unable to sleep, Sarah wandered the palace grounds. A flash of movement caught her eye near the rose garden. She crept closer, recognizing Morgana's distinctive silver hair as she met with a darker figure in the shadows, Lysander Cross. Their heads were bent close together, their conversation too quiet to hear, but something about their secretive manner sent chills down Sarah's spine. She had to tell Theron. Racing through the palace corridors, she found her way to his private study. But as she raised her hand to knock, voices from within stopped her cold. "Do you remember this one?" Morgana's warm tone carried through the heavy door. "That ridiculous diplomatic visit to the Southern Pax?" Gods, yes! Theron's rich laughter, so rarely heard, made Syrah's heart clench. "You wore that hideously formal dress and still managed to charm every alpha there." "We were happy then," Morgana said softly. Syrah backed away from the door, her chest aching as though her own partially formed bond with Theron had been severed. The sound of their shared laughter followed her down the corridor as she fled, her scars burning with repressed emotion. Back in her chambers, she pressed her hands against the window glass, watching moonlight filter through her fingers. She was more powerful now. Yes, but what good was power when the man she was growing to love spent his evenings reliving precious memories with his true mate? A knock at her door interrupted her dark thoughts. "Tomorrow we begin the real work," Celine's voice called through the wood. "The moon has shown me it's time." The Blood Moon Festival arrived with an air of ancient magic and desperate anticipation. Red lanterns floated through Blackmore Palace's grand courtyard as hundreds of wolves gathered to celebrate the one night when mate bonds were said to be strongest. The crimson moon hung low and heavy in the sky, casting everything in a supernatural glow. Syrah stood before her mirror, heart pounding as Maeve helped her into a flowing silver gown that seemed to catch every bit of moonlight. Instead of trying to hide her scars as she had done her entire life, the dress was cut to display them proudly. The silvery marks shimmered like constellations mapped across her skin. "You look like the moon herself," Maeve whispered, adjusting the delicate crown of crystal flowers in Syrah's dark hair. Walking into the festival grounds, Syrah felt hundreds of eyes turn toward her. Wolves stopped mid-conversation to stare, some with awe, others with uncertainty. Her scars gleamed more brightly than ever under the blood moon's light, making it impossible to ignore her otherworldly nature. Young unmated wolves filled the dance circle, participating in the traditional ritual of finding their destined partners through the sacred moon dance. As someone whose mate status remained officially undecided, Syrah was required to join them despite her reluctance. She could feel Theron watching from his elevated platform, where he sat with the other pack leaders and a smugly smiling Morgana. The music began, an ancient melody that seemed to call to something wild and primitive in their blood. Syrah moved through the traditional steps, trying to ignore the whispers that followed her. Her scars pulsed in time with the drum beats, casting subtle patterns of light across other dancers' faces. Suddenly, screams erupted from the children's area of the festival. A group of at least 20 rogue wolves had somehow breached the palace defenses, heading straight for where young pups played under the supervision of pack caregivers. Their intentions were clear in their savage expressions. They meant to strike at the heart of pack society by targeting its most vulnerable members. Without thinking, Syrah broke from the dance circle and ran toward the children's area. Her power surged through her veins, no longer requiring careful meditation to control. She threw her hands up just as the first rogue reached the playground, and brilliant silver light erupted from her scars. A translucent barrier of pure moonlight materialized between the rogues and the children. The young pups stared in wonder as their attackers slammed uselessly against the shimmering wall. But Syrah wasn't finished. Channeling everything Oracle Selene had taught her, she reached out with her power to touch every defending warrior within range. Warriors gasped as they felt their strength multiply. Their speed increased, their senses sharpened, their very wolves enhanced by Syrah's gift. The pack guards moved like blur of lethal precision, taking down rogue after rogue with supernatural efficiency. Even visiting alphas felt their power surge, their eyes glowing with amplified strength. When the last rogue fell, Syrah maintained the protective barrier around the children until every threat was contained. Only then did she lower her hands, swaying slightly from the enormous expenditure of power. The festival grounds had gone completely silent. One by one, the visiting alphas approached where Syrah stood. To her shock, they dropped to one knee before her, heads bowed in respect. Other wolves followed suit until nearly every person in attendance knelt beneath the blood moon's light. Through the crowd, Theron strode forward, his golden eyes blazing with something fierce and proud. Without hesitation, he climbed onto the central platform where all could see him. His voice rang out, deep and clear across the festival grounds. I, Theron Blackmore, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, declare my choice before all witnesses under the sacred blood moon. His eyes locked with Sarah's. I choose Sarah Winters as my true mate, blessed by the moon herself, destined to rule at my side. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Morgana stood from her seat, face twisted in fury, but before she could speak, Theron had already descended the platform. He crossed to where Sarah stood, took her face in his hands and kissed her with a passion that made the very air crackle with power. The moment their lips met, their partial bond exploded into full life. Silver light blazed from Sarah's scars, while golden power emanated from Theron, the two auras merging into a blinding flash that swept across the entire territory. Every wolf present felt the surge of power in their bones, the undeniable confirmation of a true mate bond blessed by the moon itself. When they finally broke apart, Sarah could see their combined light reflected in Theron's eyes. Neither noticed the chaos erupting around them, as Morgana stormed from the festival grounds, or the elders arguing about protocol. In that moment, under the watching eye of the blood moon, nothing existed but the two of them, and the unbreakable bond they had just sealed. Sarah woke slowly, surrounded by warmth and the comforting scent of pine and leather that was uniquely Theron. Golden morning light filtered through the palace windows, casting a gentle glow across the Alpha King's sleeping face. Their newly formed mate bond hummed between them like a perfect melody, filled with contentment and lingering desire from the night before. Theron's eyes opened, molten gold meeting her gaze. "Good morning, little moon," he murmured, pulling her closer. The simple action sent pleasant shivers through their bond. "It wasn't a dream, then?" Sarah touched one of her silver scars, which still held a faint glow from the previous night's events. "No dream." Theron traced the mark on her shoulder with gentle fingers. "Though I've dreamed of this moment for centuries." They eventually made their way down to breakfast, where the palace staff's reaction surprised Sarah completely. Instead of the usual careful neutrality, servants openly smiled as she passed. The head cook had prepared all her favorite foods, and Maeve had filled her usual spot at the table with fresh moonflowers. "They've been waiting to show their true feelings," Theron explained, watching her amazement with clear affection. "The staff has loved you since you arrived. They just needed to know it was safe to show it." After breakfast, Theron led Sarah through a hidden path behind the palace she hadn't discovered during her weeks of exploration. They emerged into a grove of ancient trees, their silver bark gleaming in the morning light. At the center stood a circle of white stones, each carved with symbols that made Sarah's scars tingle. "This is the sacred grove," Theron said, his voice taking on a reverent quality. "Every Alpha King has brought their mate here to share their deepest truths." He took her hands in his expression serious. "I need you to understand why I waited so long after Morgana." Sarah held her breath, feeling the weight of the moment through their bond. "For 200 years I felt incomplete, not just from losing Morgana, but from something deeper. My wolf knew we were meant for more than traditional pack leadership." His thumbs traced circles on her palms. "The moment I saw you at that auction, everything clicked into place. My wolf recognized what you were before I consciously understood the missing piece we'd been waiting for." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as years of rejection and loneliness melted away under the absolute certainty of his words, and the truth singing through their bond. They spent the rest of the morning sitting among the sacred stones, planning the future of their kingdom. Sarah shared her experiences and ideas for helping other Omegas, education programs to give them skills and independence, laws to protect them from abuse, shelters for those who needed safe spaces. "We'll start implementing these immediately," Theron declared, already making notes. "The kingdom needs these changes, and who better to guide them than someone who understands both struggle and strength? When they returned to the palace for lunch, they found the entire court in a celebratory mood. Flowers and silver ribbons had appeared throughout the halls, and someone had hung the ancient moon-blessed banners that hadn't been displayed in centuries. Even more surprising was Morgana's apparent transformation. Gone was the bitter rival of the past weeks. She approached their table with a posture of graceful acceptance. "Your Majesties," she said, bowing slightly. "If I might have a private word with Sarah after dinner? I believe there are things we should discuss, woman to woman." Theron tensed slightly, but Sarah squeezed his hand. Through their bond, she sent reassurance. Whatever Morgana wanted to say, Sarah was no longer the powerless Omega she'd been at the auction. "Of course," Sarah replied with genuine warmth. "I would welcome the chance to talk." The rest of the day passed in a blur of joy and planning. Sarah found herself constantly catching Theron's eye across rooms, their bond sparking with shared happiness and plans for the future. Every time she glimpsed her reflection, she saw not the scarred outcast she'd been, but a queen coming into her power. Servants decorated the dining hall for a formal celebration dinner, hanging crystals that caught the light like captured stars. The palace hummed with activity and excitement, everyone eager to honor their new queen and the changes she represented. Throughout the festivities, no one noticed Lysander Cross moving quietly through the lesser-used corridors of the palace. Hidden by the general commotion, he traced dark symbols in forbidden ink beneath tapestries and behind paintings, each rune pulsing with malevolent purpose as he completed its form. The celebration dinner filled the grand hall with warmth and laughter. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across tables laden with delicacies, while hundreds of wolves from noble families gathered to honor their new queen. Sarah sat beside Theron at the high table, their mate bond humming with shared joy as they watched their people celebrate. Lysander Cross rose from his seat, lifting an ornate silver goblet. His usual calculating expression was replaced with an uncharacteristically broad smile. "A toast," he called out, his voice carrying across the hall. "To our king and his chosen mate." Servants hurried forward with matching ceremonial cups, passing them to every wolf present. The ancient vessels were carved with pack symbols, traditionally used only for the most sacred occasions. "It would honor us all," Lysander continued, "if you would lead us in the traditional blessing, my king." Theron nodded, raising his cup. Though their bond flickered with a moment of unease, Sarah followed suit. The wine inside had an odd metallic scent, but she knew refusing would insult centuries of tradition. "To unity," Theron declared. "To love that transcends time." Everyone drank deeply, tradition demanding they drain their cups. The wine burned Sarah's throat with unexpected intensity. Within seconds, her scars began to tingle, then itch, then burn like acid had been poured into them. "Theron!" she gasped, but it was too late. Silver fire erupted from her body in violent waves. She screamed as her power spiraled completely beyond her control, pulsing outward in devastating ripples. Through her pain, she could see the magical threads of mate bonds throughout the room, hundreds of glowing connections linking wolf to wolf. Her power seized those bonds and began to tear. The throne room filled with agonized screams as mate bonds shattered one by one. Wolves who had been joined for decades collapsed as their sacred connections were violently severed. Sarah tried desperately to stop it, but her power wouldn't respond to her will. "No, please," she begged, watching in horror as her silver fire reached Elder Cornelius and his mate. The ancient she-wolf's eyes went wide with shock as their 90-year bond was ripped apart. She crumpled to the ground, her mate's howl of grief shaking the very foundations of the palace. "What a tragedy!" Lysander's voice cut through the chaos, now cold and satisfied. He stepped forward, dark magic crackling around his hands. "The moon-blessed wolf, revealed as a curse upon us all." Morgana stumbled forward, her eyes clearing as if awakening from a trance. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "He's controlled me since my return. Dark magic bound me to his will." "Of course I did," Lysander sneered. Did you think I spent 50 years planning to let an actual lost mate ruin everything? The kingdom needs stronger leadership than Theron's weak progressive ideas. Now they'll see the danger of his chosen queen. Sarah felt Theron's presence through their bond, damaged but not completely severed. His face contorted with pain as he fought to reach her through the waves of destructive power still pouring from her body. Arrest her, Lysander commanded the palace guards. She's attacked the very foundation of our society. The guards hesitated, their own faces twisted in agony from their severed mate bonds. But duty won out over sympathy. They moved forward with shackles, even as Sarah's power continued to pulse uncontrollably. Don't touch her! Theron snarled, but another wave of silver fire knocked him back. Sarah couldn't fight as the cold iron closed around her wrists. Her scars burned hotter than ever, and her vision blurred with tears as she saw the devastation she'd caused. All around the throne room, wolves held their mates' unconscious forms or stared blankly ahead, traumatized by the loss of bonds that had been part of their souls. Elder Cornelius cradled his mate's limp body, his ancient eyes meeting Sarah's with a mix of sorrow and horror that broke her heart. Centuries of love, trust, and connection, destroyed by her power in an instant. Take her to the cells, Lysander ordered, already moving to help restore order to the chaos he'd orchestrated. We'll let the kingdom decide what to do with a wolf who would destroy our most sacred bonds. As the guards led her away, Sarah caught one last glimpse of Theron through her tears. Her mate, perhaps soon-to-be former mate, watched helplessly as she was dragged from the hall, his face a mask of pain and confusion. Their damaged bond flickered between them like a dying flame, growing weaker with every step that took her further from the celebration that had become a catastrophe. Sarah huddled in the corner of her maximum security cell, her silver scars burning like molten metal against her skin. The cold stone walls seemed to close in around her, as she fought to contain the power that threatened to explode from her body once again. 3 days had passed since the catastrophic dinner, and her agony had only intensified. Outside her cell, a crowd of devastated wolves gathered. Their voices carried through the thick walls, a mix of heartbroken sobs and vengeful curses. My mate won't even look at me anymore, a woman wailed. 30 years of love, gone in an instant. Cursed Omega, another voice shouted. She should have been left packless. The guards kept the crowd back, but their own faces showed similar pain. Many of them had lost their mate bonds too, leaving them hollow-eyed and bitter as they performed their duties. Through her haze of pain, Sarah caught fragments of conversation between the guards during shift changes. The news made her heart ache even more. Several mated pairs throughout the kingdom had gone feral after losing their bonds, their wolves taking over in their grief. These couples attacked anyone who came near, requiring multiple warriors to subdue them. The king hasn't slept in days, one guard muttered. He's trying to maintain order, but more cases keep emerging. Some are saying this could destroy Pax Society itself. Theron. His absence cut deeper than any curse the crowd could throw at her. Their damaged bond flickered weakly in her chest, a constant reminder of what she'd lost. She understood why he couldn't come. His people needed him now more than ever, but the isolation fed her despair. As night fell on the third day, exhaustion finally pulled Sarah into a fitful sleep. In her dreams, she found herself standing in a moonlit clearing. A magnificent wolf stepped from the shadows, its fur gleaming like liquid silver. My chosen one, the wolf spoke, its voice echoing with ancient power. Do not let your pain blind you to your true purpose. Sarah fell to her knees. You're the moon goddess? I am. The divine wolf circled her slowly. And you are not what they believe. Your destiny was never to be claimed by an alpha, even one as worthy as Theron Blackmore. Then what am I meant to be? The goddess's eyes glowed like stars. You are meant to become something that has never existed, an Omega Alpha, one who will break the chains of hierarchy that have bound our children for too long. Images flooded Sarah's mind. Centuries of Omega's suffering abuse, of wolves forced into loveless bonds for politics, of power corrupting those at the top, while those below suffered. Then she saw something else, a grove hidden deep in the ancient forest, where massive stone tablets stood in a circle. The sacred grove, the goddess explained, where the original pack laws were written, laws that have been twisted over time to serve the powerful. Look at your scars, child. They are not a curse, but a map leading to this holy place. Sarah studied the silvery lines across her skin with new understanding. The patterns did form a kind of map, one she somehow knew would guide her path. "But the bonds I destroyed," Sarah whispered, guilt crushing her chest. "Were meant to be broken," the goddess said firmly. "The old system must fall for a new one to rise. You will give wolves true choice in their bonds, their ranks, their destinies. But you must complete this journey alone." The dream began to fade, the goddess's final words echoing in Sarah's mind. "Wake now, my chosen. Your path awaits." Sarah's eyes snapped open. The first thing she noticed was silence. No guards, no angry crowd. The second was that her cell door stood slightly ajar, though she knew it had been locked tight. A silver cloak lay folded just outside the cell, shimmering with an otherworldly gleam. Sarah touched it with trembling fingers, feeling the goddess's power humming through the fabric. The message was clear. She had to leave, had to find the sacred grove and fulfill her true purpose. For a moment, her heart ached for Theron. Part of her longed to find him, to explain everything. But the goddess's words rang true. This was a journey she had to make alone. Their damaged bond would have to wait. Wrapping the silver cloak around her shoulders, Sarah slipped from her cell. Her scars no longer burned, but tingled with anticipation. Each silvery line now a step on the map to her destiny. She wasn't just a rejected Omega or a cursed wolf. She was the one chosen to become the first Omega Alpha, to reshape werewolf society into something more just and free. Now she just had to find her way to the sacred grove, and hope she had the strength to fulfill the destiny the moon goddess had revealed. Sarah pressed her palm against the cold stone wall, channeling her power to dampen the mate bonds of every wolf within the palace. The sensation was like drawing a thick velvet curtain over dozens of glowing threads, muting their shine until they became nearly invisible. Guards walked past her hiding spot without a second glance, their usual ability to sense other wolves temporarily dulled. The silver cloak from the moon goddess rippled around her as she crept through the shadows. When she finally reached the palace grounds, Sarah held her arm up to the moonlight. Her scars illuminated in intricate patterns, forming directional markers that pointed toward the ancient forest to the north. Each silvery line pulsed with purpose, no longer a source of shame, but a divine map leading to her destiny. She ran through the night, her wolf lending her speed and strength. The forest welcomed her with rustling leaves and the scent of pine, while overhead, the moon lit her path. Every few miles, she would stop to recheck her bearings, letting moonlight activate the map encoded in her scars. As dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and golds, a familiar scent caught her attention. Her damaged bond hummed in response before she even turned to face him. "Theron," she whispered, watching the Alpha King emerge from the trees. He looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights, but his gaze held nothing but determination. "Did you think I would let you face this alone?" he asked, moving closer despite the visible pain it caused their injured bond. "But the kingdom, after what I did, was not your doing." Theron cut in firmly. "I know everything now. After your arrest, I confronted Morgana, the real Morgana, once we broke Lysander's spell over her. She told us how he spent decades preparing for this, making pacts with dark witch covens, gathering power that could control even alphas." Sarah's heart clenched. "Oracle Selene?" Pain flashed across Theron's face. "Lysander tortured the Sacred Grove's location from her before she could warn us. His forces are already moving. We have to reach it first." They ran together through the morning, pushing their wolves to their limits. In some territories, they found allies. Wolves who had seen through Lysander's lies, or believed in Sarah's innocence. These supporters offered shelter, food, and warnings about which paths to avoid, but others hunted them relentlessly. Lysander's placed a bounty on the mate bond destroyer, Theron explained, as they hid from a search party. He's turned my own kingdom against us. You shouldn't have come, Sarah said softly. You're risking everything. Your crown, your people's trust. Theron took her hand, ignoring the sharp sting their damaged bond produced at the contact. Some things matter more than crowns or traditions. I choose you, Sira. I choose the future you're fighting to create. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Above them, dark clouds gathered as Lysander's forces drew closer, but Sarah's scars glowed brighter than ever, pointing the way to the sacred grove, and the destiny that awaited them both. Sarah and Theron burst into the sacred grove as the first rays of moonlight pierced through the ancient canopy. Before them stood massive stone monoliths, their surfaces etched with the original laws of werewolf society. The silvery scars across Sarah's skin pulsed in recognition, matching the patterns carved into the weathered rock. These aren't just laws, Sarah breathed, running her fingers over the symbols. They're the pure form, before alphas corrupted them for power. The original bonds were meant to be gifts, not chains. As she positioned herself in the center of the stone circle to begin the ritual, howls echoed through the trees. Lysander emerged from the shadows, leading an army of blank-faced wolves bound by dark magic. At his side, Morgana moved like a puppet, her eyes glazed and distant. "You're too late!" Lysander snarled. "I've spent 50 years preparing for this moment. The old ways die tonight." Theron stepped between Lysander and Sarah. "You betrayed everything we stand for, everything I trusted you to protect." "The strong should rule the weak," Lysander said. "That's nature's law." He raised his hand, dark energy crackling around his fingers, and his enslaved army attacked. Sarah began the ritual as chaos erupted around her. She pressed her palms against the central stone, channeling moonlight through her scars while Theron engaged Lysander in direct combat. Dark magic lashed at her from all sides as Lysander's controlled wolves tried to break her concentration. The power building through the stones offered Sarah a terrible vision of choice. She could see the threads of every mate bond in existence, could feel how easily she might sever them all permanently. It would free every wolf from the hierarchy, but also rob them of their ability to form the deep connections that made their species unique. Her second option blazed just as clearly: sacrifice her bond with Theron, offering it as payment to maintain the current system. The loss would devastate them both, but the familiar order would continue. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she searched desperately for another way. Through her connection to the moon's power, she suddenly understood bonds were never meant to be chains or weapons. They were meant to be bridges built by choice and trust. "The moon blessed us with the ability to connect," Sarah called out, her voice carrying supernatural power. "But we twisted that gift into shackles. No more." She poured every ounce of her power into the stones, not destroying mate bonds, but transforming their very nature. The change rippled out like a silver tidal wave. Wherever it touched, bonds shifted from biological imperatives to conscious choices. Wolves could now choose their connections, strengthen them through mutual devotion rather than predetermined fate. Lysander screamed as his dark magic shattered. The wolves he had enslaved through corrupted bonds blinked as awareness returned to their eyes. Morgana stumbled, finally free of his control, then turned on him with a snarl of rage. All around the grove, wolves were experiencing their bonds anew. What had been instinct became choice. What had been obligation became gift. The hierarchy built on forced submission crumbled as each wolf gained the power to choose their own path, their own connections, their own destiny. The silver wave of power rippled across the world, touching every werewolf bond in existence. As the magic settled, wolves everywhere gasped as their connections transformed, still present, but now glowing with the warmth of conscious choice rather than the weight of destiny. In the sacred grove, Morgana collapsed to her knees, finally free from Lysander's dark control. Tears streamed down her face as months of suppressed emotions broke free. I never wanted to return, she sobbed, her voice raw with pain and relief. I found my true mate while in captivity with the witches, but Lysander's magic forced me to pretend otherwise. From the edge of the grove emerged a tall, gentle-faced man who radiated calm strength. Finn, Morgana whispered, reaching for him with trembling hands. The healer rushed forward, gathering her in his arms as their genuine bond flared to life, no longer hidden by dark magic. He helped me survive the witch covens, Morgana explained, looking at Theron. We fell in love during those dark years, but when Lysander found us... She shuddered, and Finn held her closer. Around them, amazing transformations were taking place. The wolves, whose bonds Sarah had accidentally severed during Lysander's manipulation, began crying out in joy as their connections reformed. Couples chose each other again, many discovering their bonds returned even stronger than before, tempered by trial and conscious choice. Elder Cornelius, who had lost his bond of 90 years, found his mate's eyes across the grove. Their reconnection blazed like a sunrise as they rushed to embrace, their choice to remain together even more meaningful than their original fated bond. The elders gathered in the sacred space, their faces transformed by wonder as they witnessed Omegas and Alphas forming equal partnerships based on mutual respect rather than dominance. Elder Cornelius stepped forward, his voice ringing with authority. We stand at the dawn of a new era, he proclaimed, where every wolf, regardless of rank, may choose their own path. He turned to Sarah, who stood tall beside Theron. You have given us all true freedom while preserving what makes our species special. Will you lead us into this new age as our first Omega Queen? Sarah's silver scars shimmered in the moonlight as she accepted the ancient crown. Theron beamed with pride, their bond pulsing stronger than ever. Not because fate demanded it, but because they chose each other freely and completely. 6 months later, under a brilliant silver moon, Sarah and Theron celebrated their official mating ceremony. As they spoke their vows of love and partnership, Sarah's scars began to glow. The assembled wolves watched in awe as the marks transformed, flowing like liquid moonlight across her skin, until they became stunning silver tattoos, the mark of the moon's avatar. At the celebration feast that followed, Sarah and Theron made their joyous announcement. The gathered packs erupted in cheers as they revealed Sarah's pregnancy. Their children would be the firstborn into this new world, where every wolf had the power to write their own destiny. The news spread quickly through the territories. The cursed Omega had become their greatest blessing, ushering in an age where bonds were strengthened by choice, not weakened by command. The hierarchy remained, but now it was built on respect and willing cooperation, rather than forced submission. Under the guidance of their Omega Queen, Werewolf Society had finally evolved into what it was always meant to be, a community bound by love, not fear. If today's story echoed in your heart, I hope you'll stay. Subscribe, and I'll be here again tomorrow with another quiet story full of the kind of love that lasts.